Join us today. So this meeting session is being recorded, and we ask you to please mute your phone if you are connected via phone so that we don't have background noise in the recording. But again, my name is Sarah Lipsey from Atlas Research, and I welcome you to the EMSC Family Advisory Network webinar series. Today's topic is going to be FAN representatives and state partnership program managers working effectively together. So just a little bit about the platform that we're using. You can connect through via Adobe Connect on call-in for audio or listen to the audio through your computer. If you have any questions that you would like to ask our panelists when we get to the questions section, you can ask them via phone, or if you'd like, you can type them into the chat box, which is on the lower right-hand side of your screen, and I will read the questions out to the panelists. So you've got two different ways you can ask questions when we get to the panel section. And again, please mute your phones and your computer microphones when you're not speaking to decrease the background feedback. So today's agenda, we have the welcome and introductions. We are going to go over the 2018 EMSC annual grantee meeting and give you a recap of what we talked about there. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming FAN activities, and then we're going to go into our panel, FAN and State Partnership Managers Working Together Effectively. So I'd like to introduce the EMSC FAN Activities Planning Team. From HRSA, from the Emergency Medical Services for Children group, we've got Jocelyn. From EIC, we have Jean-Raphael and Terry and Cassidy. And from Atlas Research, there's myself, Sarah, and Tanisha. Thanks everybody on this team for helping put together this great webinar. And thanks to all of the FAN representatives who are joining us today, both on our panel, who we'll get to here in a moment, and who's just joining in to listen. We've got a map here showing our FAN representatives across the states and territories, and if you don't see your name here, please email Cassidy and we'll include you on the FAN mailing list and include you on the map. So I'd like to turn this over for a few minutes to Jocelyn to take us through the 2018 annual grantee meeting FAN track recap. Jocelyn?
Hi, everybody. It's Joss. I thought a natural jumping off point for the first webinar for FAN would be to kind of begin where we left off the last time when we were all together in Austin. I thought that picture came out really well. Great representation from everybody who was there. If you will recall, we actually concluded the meeting with a joint session that included state partnership managers and FAN reps. And one of the things, we had a list of things that we found out from you that you were interested in seeing more of. This is just a brief kind of condensed list of what you talked about wanting more. That you'd like to explore your role a little bit more and brainstorm, increase your comfort level with FAN social media, internally and externally, have quarterly FAN calls, and this is going to serve in part to fill that need. Develop a network of FAN reps throughout the states, which we really have built out. We've got somebody in almost every state and territory at this point, only a few who are still looking to fill the role. And you said you'd like to have a toolkit like from the old days when we had the manual that outlined the roles of what FAN representatives can do. Those were the top asks. There were many others. Next slide, please. So again, these are the activities. Primarily, I'm going to talk. I just addressed the left column there, and primarily, I'm going to focus on the upcoming FAN activities. These are things that we've been working hard on behind the scenes to coordinate based on what you all like, and to try to encourage, more engagement with our FAN group. We will be having ongoing program of support and communication. That means anything from a lot of emails, keeping you guys in the loop, to pushing out interesting webinar opportunities, not just with EMSC, but with other organizations who sometimes share with us that they're doing webinars that we think would be of interest to our fan group. We will also be doing monthly posts in the EMSC Pulse newsletter. Hopefully all of you are getting the EMSC Pulse. If you're not, please let Cassidy know so that she can add you to the list of folks who get that. That comes out monthly, and it is full of really valuable information, not only about the program, but about the whole sort of industry of EMS and EMSC. So it's a great resource. We'll be doing quarterly webinars. This is the first one. And they will be on topics of interest to provide you all with continuing education and on topics. Okay, we're getting some feedback. Whoever just logged on, if you could mute your phone or your computer, thank you. That worked really well and very fast. So again, we'll be doing the quarterly webinars, and you'll be hearing from us to ask a lot of questions about what you want more of, what you want to hear more about, what you want to learn more about. We will be having fan volunteers serve on a steering committee that will help kind of discern what direction is best to go in, and a new website focused on fan needs. And that will be housed with the EIIC coming in 2019. They're working on it now. Next slide, please. So I'd like to just give a shout out and a big thank you to those new members who volunteered to be a part of the FAN steering committee. We feel strongly that the committee, that FAN really should be led, and the direction of it should be led by FAN representatives. And Julie from Louisiana, Kim from Indiana, Lori from New Hampshire, Leanne from North Dakota, Nancy from Connecticut, Sandy from Florida, and Whitney from Utah have volunteered to be on the FAN committee, and we're going to get started working together in all of your behalf in January 2019, which is right around the corner. So you'll be hearing more from this group as well. Next slide. And that's it from me, and I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah.
Great, thank you so much. A lot of exciting activities coming up, and thanks so much to the FAN Steering Committee members. We're really excited to work together. So now I'm going to move us into what's going to be the bulk of today's webinar, which is our panelists on FAN and state partnership managers working together effectively. And I have some questions for the panelists that I'm going to be asking, but if people on the phone and on the webinar have questions, we would love to hear them. I'm going to pause and ask for questions at a couple of points during the discussion, but if you have a question that you'd like me to read out loud, just type it into the chat box on the lower right-hand side, and I will read it to the panelists. So this is our group of panelists that we have today. I know that we have Team Louisiana on the phone and online, Julie and Amanda, and we have Team New Hampshire, Lori and Anna on as well. I want to pause and see Team Indiana, Kimberly and Margot. Have you been able to join us? The Team Indiana may be running a little bit late. We're hoping that we're able to jump in when we get started with the discussion, but we have two great teams, Louisiana and New Hampshire, and we're very excited to have them here speaking with us. So I want to start with a question for the state partnership managers. And that question is, what do you look for in a FAN representative? What are characteristics that managers should be looking for? And I'm going to ask Amanda if you would weigh in on that first.
Thank you. So for a FAN representative, it's important that that person has a child or a close relationship with a child who accesses the EMS system so that they have a working knowledge of their own experiences from that perspective. Ideally, the person is engaging and engages in community outreach initiatives. And then also the person is an advocate for children and for affecting change rather than having a personal agenda. Thanks.
Great. Anna, what would be your answer?
I think a lot of this relies on your program manager and how experienced they are. So I came in to the program as the program manager with in-field experience, but no experience at the administration level of EMS, but was fortunate to come into two FANs who had already been involved in the EMS for Children program for many years. I do think that the flexibility of the FAN to travel once a year and maybe sit on the advisory committee is extremely helpful. And with those that they are a bit outgoing and willing to speak up. And I think that while it's important for them to want to help all children, it does help if they have some sort of personal agenda, some experience, either in the positive or negative outlook on EMS care for children. And as Amanda said, I absolutely agree. It's very helpful and almost required that they have their own child or have a child who's close with them.
Great. Amanda, what do you think are the most important things for a new FAN member to learn?
I think that some of the most important things right off the bat are some of the politics that take place. That's important so that they're not blindsided by some things. The importance and the history of the performance measures that we're having to meet at the time period are important because nobody wants to just get on board with something that they're not familiar with. So understanding the performance measures that we have to meet and understanding the EMS system as a whole from the time an ambulance is called until a patient is admitted or discharged from the ER.
Great. Anna, is there anything that you would add to that for what a new FAN member should learn?
No, I agree with Amanda, having some background information in the emergency medical services, or at least the willingness to learn that. And yeah, as Amanda said, willingness to learn the EMS for Children program at a larger scale, being at least willing to learn that side of it as well.
Great. So I'm going to turn to the FAN representatives now and ask, why did you want to be a FAN representative? Julie, would you be willing to take that?
Hi. So when I first agreed to be a FAN rep, I really didn't have any knowledge at all about the performance measures. I thought my role would be to provide parent perspective to, the advisory board and to maybe participate in some of the safety programs or community initiatives or that type of thing that the advisory board decided to invest in. So I did have an extensive experience from the user perspective with my child in EMS, both pre-hospital providers in the ED department, and I thought I could offer some perspective there.
Great. Lori, why did you want to be a FAN representative?
Well, I had been a clinical educator on the grant back in 95 through 99, and then I had my first child. And so I'd come off the grant as an employee, and because I had reproduced, I now qualified as a family rep. Was really the easiest job description. I won't say that was the easiest qualification. I suppose that's not true. But my child is fairly typical, but we had just come off a grant where we had been creating a curriculum for EMS providers on children with special health care needs. So while I did not have a lot of personal experience dealing with my child in the EMS system or in hospital, I had that sort of background piece. And between being an EMT myself and having been through the process of creating the curriculum, and then now having a child, as an EMT, when you don't have kids, but you have dogs, you would rather any patient be, an old person or a child, but please don't let it be an animal. Then once you have your own kids, of course, your perspective changes. And that was quite useful, both in appreciating sort of the other side of the picture and really informing my work with EMSC from a different perspective. So that was good.
Great. Julie, what do you think is most important for state managers to know about FAN and about the family perspective?
So I think the number one thing is that fans don't just want to be space fillers. We want to be an asset. We realize that it's a requirement of the grant, but we also want to be useful, and a fan can help the state program manager in usually does not have a great a large staff to work with, and so we can help fulfill some of alleviate some of that burden.
Okay. Lori, what do you think is the most important thing for state managers to know about FAN and working with family reps?
I think choosing the right FAN rep really depends on what the nature of your project is. Some projects are going to need an advocate. Some projects are going to need a subject matter expert. Some are going to need someone with connections with a broader community. So I think to some degree it depends on the program. But it always amazes me that parents of children who do have complicated medical needs and complicated histories find the capacity not just to be the advocate from hell if need be for their own child, but then are able to take it to that next step. That being said, they have to also be able to look beyond their own child's experience, and so many of them have networked with other families. I think that capacity to see the bigger picture when it comes to whatever the goal of the grant is and how they can interplay in that, that's what really makes a difference.
Great. That's very informative. So I have a question from the audience, and I think this question is for the state partnership managers, but I think that our FAN representatives could probably weigh in as well. How do state partnership managers recruit FAN members? How do you get connected in the first place?
I'll step into this since it sounds like we're not directing towards Amanda first. So this is Anna from New Hampshire. As I mentioned, I came into the program with FAN representatives already present, but I think that you can look into the projects that you're wanting to do and decide what necessities or what features of a FAN would help you with those projects. But you can also look to people at the state level that already have children and would be interested in participating because they'll already have an EMS background. Or if you know you're going to need some technological expertise for your social media presence, reach out to somebody that that is good at web design that also has children. So I think that while the FAN representative should have a child, you don't need to necessarily start there, but rather look at other features that you'd like to have in your FAN and draw from the community that you now have those skills in their skill set.
Great. Amanda, is there anything you would add to that?
No, I think that was a great response. Thank you.
Great.
This is Lori.
Julie, go ahead.
I would also advocate using groups like Family Voices because they tend to have very active parents who have already had some experience in advocating beyond their personal experience. They tend to be sort of those trained storytellers that can inform a situation or inform a piece of legislation, something like that. They tend to be a great resource. And the other place to look is in the EMS agency within the state. In New Hampshire here, for example, we have several providers who routinely do presentations on working with individuals with autism or on the autism spectrum and the kind of special approaches that would work best with those children. And so they obviously have both the EMS experience and the private experience with PDD or autism spectrum that might be useful.
Great.
This is Julie. Another resource that is already in your communities or your school nurses, while they themselves may not be the candidate, they can usually help identify parents within their schools who are proactive and good advocates.
Great, that makes a lot of sense as a resource. So the next question I have for the panel is one that gets a lot of discussion, but it's pretty practical. How do you keep in contact? What are the best methods, the methods that work well for fostering communication between FAN and the state partnership managers?
Julie and we text and email weekly about different things. She'll shoot something my way, an idea, and I'll pass something her way. So it's pretty frequent, weekly, if not more often, and via text and email.
This is Anna. I would concur with that. Lori and my other FAN representative, Eric, we're constantly in contact, I'd say at least weekly, if not more regularly. And as all FANs, you're likely to have them sitting on your advisory committee in that role. So you theoretically be communicating with them over that. I happen to run into both of my FANs at the state level as well, once or twice a month, so we can meet in person, just grab a cup of coffee and just update each other on where we are with particular projects or the program at large.
Great.
Chad from New Mexico. I think that Catherine sends out a lot of emails, but when she really needs something done, she's great at texting to get right down into us and let us know quickly that we need to respond.
Great. So it sounds like texts are an efficient method, but also face-to-face meetings on a regular basis.
This is Anna again. I like that response of I think you said your name was Chad from New Mexico. I like the idea that you constantly keep in contact via email, but use the power of technology and texting and calling as necessary. Has anybody had any issues with either the inability to reach out to the program manager or FAN, or vice versa, where that accessibility was taken advantage of and they felt like their privacy was maybe stepped upon because somebody was reaching out to them too much via personal communications?
New Mexico, not at all.
Georgia, not at all. Norma Campbell, the program manager, she does real well. I'm on the advisory committee there also as well.
Okay, great. It sounds like that's something maybe to keep in mind, to not overwhelm each other with text, or personal contact. But it seems as though for the most part, it works out pretty well.
Actually, if I could add one other thing, please. This is Chad again from New Mexico. That Catherine's really good about being very, very positive and letting us know, hey, thank you for your time, this is what's up, and being very appreciative because we're all spread so thin. So I think that her positive influence from time to time just reminds us, and she reminds us also that we are volunteers, and she's very thankful. So I appreciate that personally.
That's great. another question, again, to both the fan reps and the managers, how do you work together to set your goals and objectives for the grant, for the work that you're doing?
I think in New Hampshire, this is still a work in progress. We've just got our advisory committee revamped up this year. And actually, I'd like to defer to Lori to see if she has any suggestions on how we move forward with that.
Well, you've done some good work in trying to target what the goals of our getting together, physically getting together, are. I mean, we have good communication, as you said, because we do run into each other fairly often at other types of events, because we do, all three of us, Eric and I and you, all work in the sort of EMS and injury prevention field, so it's a lot of overlap. But in making good use of the advisory committee, again, it's sort of got to depend on what the goals of the particular grant are. I mean, there was a time when we had very little contact with our advisory committee because we were doing equipment type issues, and that really didn't involve our principal investigator very much, etc. Now we're talking about a different kinds of goals. So the injury prevention person at Health and Human Services is more engaged. Our PI is more engaged. So, again, I think to some degree finding suitable reasons to meet rather than, as someone said, I don't want to just check off a box that I have fan reps or that I have advisory council meetings.
Hi, this is Julie. Sorry. So, originally I was not at all involved in the writing of the grant and choosing performance goals toward the performance measures. I had no knowledge of that at all. But this go around, I was involved in that, so it really helped to understand, what we're trying to achieve with EMSC. It also helped to ownership and my role as a fan to understand the performance measures and the goals and objectives that we think that are reasonable for our state to achieve those.
Great. How often do you have to revisit those goals and objectives? Do you have a regular pattern of revisiting, or is it more as necessary?
This is Amanda. So we revisit ours as necessary, but I feel like when we wrote the goals and objectives, when they were written, we wrote them for a marathon instead of a sprint. So we knew that some of the things we were trying to achieve were going to take time, which means we don't have to revisit them very often. We just have to check in with them.
Great.
We haven't in New Hampshire really, I guess, had the time to or need to revisit the performance measures. It may be something that we have to work on moving forward. I'm also hoping both of my fan, because my program director can't attend this year's National EMSC meeting in DC. I have both of my fans coming, so hopefully that'll be a really strong reminder of what the performance measures are and how we are approaching achieving them.
Hi, this is Julie. I also want to say that Amanda does a really good job at our advisory committee meetings of keeping those goals and objectives before us. So those are quarterly meetings, so they don't get pushed to the background and forgotten about.
Great. So I want to move on to another set of questions. And again, just a reminder for folks on the phone and on the in the Adobe Connect, you can type a question into the chat if you would like. Or if you would like, I'm going to pause for just a moment and see if we have a question from the audience. Does anybody want to ask a question for our panelists? If not, I will continue with the questions that I have. So this is a question for both the fan reps and the managers. How would you describe FAN's role in your state? And kind of what we mean is, what is kind of the main functions of the FAN and how they help promote the state's interest with their role?
This is Amanda. So on the EMSC Advisory Committee, Julie has been a fantastic resource for me because she's been in the EMSC scene for much longer than I have been. So she's a great asset for history and tenure of the program, sort of the lessons learned and ideas and visions moving forward. But she's also got that perspective from a parent who uses the EMS system as well.
Great.
I'll go ahead and agree with what Amanda said as far as having somebody who's a veteran of the EMSC program as a program manager coming in, being able to fall back on my fan reps to really just educate me on the program. They also both work at the state level. Lori is on the Poison Control Center board, and then Eric is a paramedic in one of the local EDs and also sits with us on the protocol committee. So they really play a role not only on the advisory committee and within the EMSC program, but also are both very outgoing and willing to push the pediatric agenda at the state level as well, which is, again, a really good reason to have a fan that works on at the State Bureau of EMS or your state's respective EMS group.
Mm-hmm.
This is Lori. It keeps Anna from being the sole voice for children in the conversation. We get to sort of also pipe up and say, yeah, we need to have the pediatric issues addressed on this one. So it's just good backup.
Great. For the fan reps, when you are kind of representing the state at various functions, how prepared or successful did you feel in attending those functions and representing those interests?
It's Julie. So as someone who is a user of the EMS system but not work in the system, initially I did not feel comfortable. But as I learned more about the performance measures and as I learned more about the work of our advisory board, I have become more comfortable, representing our program. So things that we've done is we've had a table on for EMS Week. We had a table at in the legislature, in the lobby of our Capitol building when they were in session. And so we were able to just do some community education, not only among our lawmakers and policy makers, but also the community that came to advocate. I did feel comfortable because Amanda had done such a good job of educating our advisory board on our performance measures and our role. One thing that I believe a fan brings is knowledge of community networks that maybe providers are not aware of. So if you are a user of the EMS system because you have a child who needs those services often, you are a part of other systems in the state that are collaboratives or advocacy networks or peer support organizations or school systems, all of these things, systems and networks that are already in place. So I see myself as a conduit to bring those two together.
Great. So it sounds like in terms of you feeling comfortable, part of it was from experience and part of it was from being prepared, having discussions with the advisory committee on your role and the goals of the state program, what else is helpful for FAN representatives to feel comfortable being that community-facing person?
Chad from New Mexico. Oh.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, being an educator, it kind of has been a very easy transition. So, although obviously not everybody's an educator, but it just seems to make the process easier by knowing the lingo, knowing the faces, and New Mexico is a very small community, so it makes it fairly easy to be a FAN rep.
Great.
John from Georgia. I'm also an educator as well. And working with Norma Campbell, I was able to also work with her in helping to actually write the grant. So that helped me to understand all the different processes that were there. And I'm teaching just laypersons, the CPR, teaching also people who want to learn pediatric life support as well, with special need kids that I have as well for myself and my family.
Great, that's very helpful. Thank you both for chiming in. For the FAN reps and also for the state partnership managers, are there specific preparations that FAN reps need for attending legislative sessions?
Absolutely. This is Julie. I think one of the best services that a program manager can provide is education on legislative advocacy. Some people may not really understand the process. It may have been a long time since they had civics in high school. And they also may not understand that program managers, where their program, the agencies within which their programs sit and function at an organizational level may have certain things that are prohibitive for them to be able to do advocacy, and a FAN can fulfill that role. But a FAN can't do that if they're not well prepared and well educated. I appreciated the training that we received at the EMSC meeting this past year. Many people come already with that experience, but others don't. And so it's important that you have that role. Our Bureau of Family Health that our EMSC program sits within now has an agenda for family engagement, and part of that is to provide a well educated or trained group cohort of parents to provide perspective to policymakers or decision-making boards.
This is Lori. New Hampshire also has something called New Futures, which is a sort of public health legislative action group that does a lot of advocacy training for the general public. Even if you're just accompanying your program manager to a session just to observe the first time, it can be very useful just to see the process for signing up, for offering to testify, for having a written testimony that you want to share with each one of the legislators so they have a copy of it as well, and then just sort of being able to back each other up if there are questions. It's absolutely a team sport, and it does take a little getting used to, but there are some great training programs out there because non-for-profits, profits, and the public health agencies recognize the need to have people outside of the agency who can speak. It's a great point that Julie made, I think it was Julie, about our program managers are not always free to advocate in the way that, or to be able to speak out with the kind of support that they need. So that's a great role for us.
Great. So, all right, one barrier that we heard is that, and we heard this at the grantee meeting that we had this past year, is that FAN representatives sometimes have a hard time being heard at some of these meetings and some of these sessions we had one person describe me ignored as just a mom, and there were similar comments. For both the fan reps and the state partnership managers who can support them, what are some of the opportunities we can take to address this issue in the future?
This is Amanda. So I think it's important that both to understand that both the fan and the SP manager play a vital role in making the partnership successful. The manager has to have a clear idea of what he or she is looking for in a fan, and then the fan has to have a clear understanding of what his or her role is within EMSC. Specifically, if the manager is looking for a new fan, have a role description ready for individuals who may be a potential candidate, or this leaves no question about what the fan is getting into. So maybe they don't want to be a part of this. You know, if it's a new potential candidate, they may see a role description and decide that's not what they want to do. Or for that matter, they may look at it enthusiastically. And if the fan and manager work together for some time, then revisiting each of the roles or collaborating to create a new role description will help them. And this holds the manager accountable for valuing the fan's input, but it also holds the fan responsible for speaking up. And it's important to remember that you can't expect a fan, or managers can't expect a fan to buy into something that they're not a part of creating and maintaining.
Great, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Chapter in New Mexico, that's frustrating to hear that if there's almost like a hostile relationship, because that's not going to go anywhere. So probably exposing all your chips early on in a relationship so that it doesn't develop maybe into that hostile relationship, because that's certainly not going to be productive for anybody.
Yeah, I agree, although Lori clearly doesn't have a hard time being heard at meetings, but making sure that you have them as well informed as they would like to be, so that they feel empowered and educated on the same page, not only for you, but also the larger program, so that when they show up to meetings or workshops, they go in confidently. And I also think that all of the additional aspects of the program that HRSA is working into and EIAC is working into, like the newsletter with the fan mail, I think all of that is really important for our fan network, but also making sure that they are invited to things and are kept up to speed with what's going on.
This is Julie. So two perspectives. First, I agree that the job description provides mutual benefit to the program manager, to the fan, to the advisory board. I think a well-educated advisory board understands that there are people there with different representation to fulfill specific purposes. And the just a mom perspective is the real lived experience, the life experience. So as with any programs, you know, we can sit in our offices and devise these programs that sound beautiful and then roll them out and wonder why they do not work, because they weren't practical. You know, if my child is, you know, not breathing that day, well, we're not going to check off all of your boxes to make sure that we went through all the procedures, you know, that we were supposed to according to your program, you know. We make things happen and do what we have to do with, and that is a valuable perspective to any working group. So I would encourage fan representatives to realize the value that they bring, and to not devalue themselves as just a fan rep. And I do believe that the toolkit, whatever form it takes in this new iteration of it, provides that service to direction to a fan, but also it helps describe the role for the other players, the program managers, the advisory board.
Great. Thank you. Another area of confusion that we heard at the grantee meeting is around the role of FAN members in supporting the EMSC performance measures. For our state teams here, what has this role been like in your experience, both from the FAN and the state partnership manager point of view?
I think in New Hampshire we're going to be working on this relationship around the role of fans in the performance measures, making sure that the fan reps have, again, as much information as they would like to have about the performance measures so that they feel up to date, but also feel empowered to participate in moving them, agree or disagree, but an evolution of relations in the next year or two.
Great.
New Mexico, I think Catherine is great about updating and kind of bulletizing information so that it's the nuts and the bolts to make us comfortable in speaking.
In Louisiana, we formed subcommittees of our advisory board, and a couple of things here. So Julie was instrumental in helping create the descriptions for the subcommittees that we've created, but she also was first in line to say, I want to be a part of this subcommittee and this subcommittee, and gauging her interest. And so as a program manager, it was important that I got her perspective in the subcommittee descriptions that we wrote, because she has a different perspective than EMS professionals and healthcare providers. So that was important. So in terms of meeting the performance measures, how that tie in is the subcommittees that we created are all in some way geared towards the performance measures, but if the performance measures were to change, the subcommittees would still be relevant.
Okay, so this is Julie. So to support the performance measures, a fan really needs to understand them first and foremost. And then, a fan may be able to help engage or recruit community support and involvement to lobby at the state or agency level for systems level changes, either just policies within agencies to support the program managers, or in the legislature, or they're to provide perspective to those decision-making boards, whether it be a task force, for example, on the importance of having a pediatric coordinator within the EMS community. That's a performance measure, right, for each agency. But, that might be a tough sell, but if you have a user perspective of why it's important for my family for you to have this, and my family is representative of the children in your region that you're servicing, and as a user of your service, this is why it's important. So that's one way a fan can support those performance measures.
Great. So I have a question from the audience. What would you say is the average amount of time per week you spend on fan activities? I think for the two fan representatives.
This is Julie. It's a little difficult for me to tease that out. Amanda and I work in the same bureau. I work for a program that is within the same bureau. So the EMSC fan role is volunteer, but it's easy for me to work on it during the course of my work day. So it's a little hard for me to tease it out on a weekly basis.
Okay.
Chad from New Mexico. I think that's hard to answer right now. I basically just quit my other second jobs, hoping to spend more time with the MSC. So I hope that my dedication can increase finally with slowing down in the workplace.
Great. Lori, did you have an estimate?
Again, it's hard for me to sort of say, only because I also work in New Hampshire government. So I work part-time for the Poison Center, so that's doing injury prevention work, and I am working on a SAMHSA grant with the Department of Safety on opioid outreach. So we overlap a lot. You know, again, I'm being on the protocol committee, working on Safe Kids, working with the Injury Prevention Advisory Council. So there's some overlap. It's not it's a very manageable amount of time because we manage to communicate, you know, often enough as needed. So
great. So I see that we're having a conversation in the chat about pre-planning with EMS for children with special needs and the discussion of an electronic form with AAP. I know that we've included this as a topic of interest, that we've noted this as a topic of interest for the webinar series, so we would be looking for updates as well, and we could look for other ways to provide info on this topic. It looks like Cassidy from EIC is also going to do some looking into the AAP form in that conversation. I want to, we've got about 5 minutes left in the webinar, and I want to just pause and see if there are any additional questions for our panelists. For our panelists, thank you all so much for being here. I'd like to see if you would like to kind of give a last word or a last thought for us. I'll start with Team Louisiana.
Yeah, we just want to say thank you for this opportunity. And, you know, like we said earlier, Julie and I both agree that it's really, human nature is you can't buy into something that you're not a part of creating and maintaining. So as a manager, I encourage the other managers to always include your fan rep whenever you're creating and maintaining some of your program initiatives. And I would encourage the fans to, when you're not hearing from your managers, nudge them, hold them accountable, let them know that you're still there and that you're still interested.
Great. Team New Hampshire, any last thoughts for our group?
I just posted in the chat the address for the Facebook group that we have. It's a closed group for FAN, and people from different states share information. Sometimes if there's an interesting post or a program or something coming out of a federal agency on like family reunification during emergencies or that sort of thing, we post things on there. So it would be great. We have about 28 members, which means we clearly don't have all of the fan reps on there, but they're welcome to join. So I put that in the chat. Fox.
This is John Kelly from Georgia. Could we get an email on that? Because I'm not on the computer right now and I'm just driving down the road. So could we get that sent to us by email? The
sure.
chat for the Facebook,
Absolutely.
if you don't mind, please. Georgia.
Yep.
Yeah, we could certainly touch base about bringing that more widely to the fan reps.
Great.
I'd like to reiterate, as I believe it was Chad had said, that showing appreciation to your fans because they are, for the most part, volunteers. But I also wanted to thank Chad and John for sort of being part of the unofficial panel. But like any relation, you want to keep the communications fluid and regular. So in working with either a new fan rep or an old fan rep, a new fan rep or a veteran fan rep.
Thank you.
Making sure, you're welcome, making sure everyone is on the same page on a regular basis is really key to the whole process.
And treating each other with respect. I think that's a big piece of it too. respect for your individual expertise.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. So again, thank you so much to our panelists. We really appreciate all that you shared today and being willing to talk to us about the working partnership between FAN representatives and state partnership managers. And thank you to all of us who joined us and chimed in and asked great questions. Just a few words on our next steps. Be looking for the FAN section in the December EMSC Pulse update. Should be coming soon, I believe. And we have some future webinar potential topics for consideration listed here. I think when you registered for this webinar, we asked you to rank some of these so that we can choose our next topics. And the next webinar will be coming in 2019. Oh, according to Cassidy, the next Pulse will be released in the next week. Joss, do you have any parting words?
Just to say thank you so much for everybody who tuned in today. This is the beginning of a journey together, and I really, really appreciate your taking time out of what I know is a very busy day to join. We're hoping to build on the momentum and camaraderie, amongst our FAN reps. And thank you, Sarah, for guiding us today through the webinar. And we're really looking forward to feedback from all of you. It doesn't matter whether you reach out to me, Sarah, and anybody, Cassidy. We're all a part of working on FAN together for you, but we can't do it without your input. So we do appreciate, again, very much that you took the time today, and we'll be looking forward to the future discussions and webinars and things like that. So thanks to everybody. Have a very happy holiday season, and we will be in touch very soon, and we'll follow up with emails with the information that we promised.
Great. Thank
you
so
all.
much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.